It was never about a warning. It was never about a threat hanging over your head, a countdown to punishment, or a deity waiting for you to fail. What you have been feeling, that pressure, that restlessness, that sense that the ground beneath your old life is thinning, that is not judgment. That is physics. You have reached the maximum storage capacity of your old container. Every room, every relationship, every routine that once held you is now full. There is no more space in the architecture you built, and the life you have been living cannot hold one more ounce of what you are becoming. This is not a moral failure. It is a mathematical fact. Think of it the way you would think of a vessel designed for a certain volume. You can pour into it, and it will hold what it was built to hold. But there comes a moment when the volume exceeds the design. The container does not grow because you will it to. It does not stretch because you have been faithful. It reaches its limit, and then something has to give. The warning you have been hearing, this idea of a last chance, has been dressed in religious fear for so long that the true shape of it has been buried. Strip that away. Strip away the panic, the apocalyptic imagery, the sense that you are being menaced by an angry hand. What remains is not a threat. What remains is a window. The universe is giving you a brief grace period, a moment of pure mathematical momentum where you still have the choice to step voluntarily out of the environments that have been holding you back. Not because those environments are evil, not because the people in them are your enemies, but because they are lower density, and you have outgrown the density they operate at. You have reached the ceiling of what they can sustain, and the timeline is about to shift automatically. When that shift happens, those environments will be stripped away whether you are ready or not. That is the part no one wants to say out loud. The stripping is coming either way. The only question is whether you walk out of the room with your dignity and your timing intact, or whether the room collapses around you and forces you through the rubble. I have stood in that room. I know what it feels like to sense the walls closing in from the inside, not because the structure was wrong but because it was complete. There was a lecture hall at the University of Edinburgh where I spent years trying to make a legitimate case within a legitimate institution for ways of knowing that the room itself had no instruments to measure. 23 students sat in that seminar, trained by 12 years of education to dismiss indigenous knowledge frameworks as a category error. Not wrong, simply not real. And I stood at the front of that room, and I felt the container reaching its capacity, and I told myself the answer was to try harder, to find the right language, to make the case more convincingly. The language required to carry what I was there to explain did not exist inside that room. That was not a failure of my argument, it was the architecture of the room itself. I had reached the maximum storage capacity of that container, and I did not want to seal it because leaving meant losing 17 years of research, a career, an identity. I know what it costs to look at a full container and admit that the answer is not to build a bigger one. The answer is to leave. Which brings me to the part that has been haunting you. The phrase that has been sitting in your chest like a stone you cannot swallow. You have heard it whispered in your own mind, probably at 3 in the morning, in that hollow hour when the truth is too loud to ignore. What happens before it happens to you? You have been bracing for tragedy. You have been scanning your life for the disaster, the illness, the collapse that everyone has been warning you about. I want to name something for you, and I want you to hear it slowly, because your nervous system has been trained to expect the worst possible translation of these words. It is not a catastrophe. It is not a punishment. It is not the bill coming due for every delay and every hesitation. What is coming toward you is what I have come to call mandatory structural acceleration, a sudden, irreversible surge of authority, public visibility, and financial stewardship landing in your life. Not in a trickle, not in a manageable sequence with time to adjust and metabolize between arrivals. A surge, the kind of voltage that does not ask whether your vessel is ready, because the architecture of your life has already been calibrated for it. You have been preparing for this in ways you cannot see. The isolation, the closed doors, the quiet that has felt like rejection. That was not the universe abandoning you. That was the containment field holding you steady while the upgrade completed. But here is the uncomfortable truth at the center of this. The surge is coming whether you disengage from the old attachments or not. The acceleration does not wait for your permission. It does not check whether you have severed the relationships that have been draining you, whether you have stopped replaying the betrayals, whether you have stepped into the role that has been waiting for you. If you do not voluntarily disengage now, if you keep one foot in the old density, keep draining yourself into containers that cannot hold your voltage, keep telling the story of why you have not moved, then when the surge lands, it will not be the smooth transition. It will be friction. Severe friction, the kind that shears through the parts of your life that were never built to survive contact with what you are about to carry. This is not a threat. This is the difference between stepping through a door and being pushed through a wall. You have a grace period, a window of momentum where the choice is still yours. And I want to ask you something directly, because I think you have been avoiding the question for longer than you want to admit. What is the container you have been refusing to leave? Not the job. Not the city. I mean the deeper one. The identity you built around being someone who has not yet arrived. The story that explains why you are still waiting. The attachments that feel like loyalty but function like anchors. You know what they are. You have known for years. The question is not whether you know. The question is what you are going to do with the window that is open right now. I have watched people reach this exact threshold. I have watched them feel the pressure building and choose to stay, because leaving felt like betrayal, or because they wanted one more sign, or because they believed the chaos around them would settle if they just held on a little longer. And I have watched the timeline shift automatically and strip those environments away with a force that left them standing in rubble, wondering why they had not walked out while the door was still intact. That is not divine cruelty. That is momentum. When a vessel reaches capacity and the flow does not stop, the vessel does not grow. It breaks, and the breaking is not a punishment. It is the only remaining option in a physics that does not negotiate. You have been told your whole life that this moment would come dressed in warning, that the voice would be harsh, that the urgency would feel like panic. I am telling you the truth from the other side of it. The voice is not harsh. The urgency is not panic. It is the most loving thing you will ever hear, because it is giving you the one thing the universe does not owe anyone: a choice. Before the shift strips the old environments away on its own timetable, you get to decide. You get to walk out with your timing intact. You get to leave the room before it becomes rubble. And there is something I have not told you yet about what happens on the other side of that door, something about the difference between the container that breaks you and the one that was built for you to fill. The window is open now. What you do with it is the only variable that remains. You feel it before you name it, the way your hand hesitates over a phone call you know you should not return. The way your stomach tightens at the mention of a family dinner you have been dreading for weeks. That is the first step of the protocol, and it is not a feeling you should be fighting. That is the signal. Sever residual attachments, quietly, without waiting for another fight, without the dramatic confrontation you have rehearsed in your head 100 times, without the final word you have wanted to say for years. Deadweight relationships and toxic family dynamics do not need a funeral. They need a door that closes and stays closed. I spent 4 years in a rented room in Leith learning this the hard way, 18 years of research in a cardboard box, 17 years of building something that walked out behind me into silence. The severing did not come with a goodbye that satisfied me. It came with the absence of a goodbye at all. That is what quiet means. No announcement. No explanation. Just the withdrawal of your presence from places that only ever wanted your presence to extract from it. And here is what most people miss. You do not need to win the fight to leave it. You just need to not show up to it. The fight only exists if both parties attend. Second step. Relinquish the victim narrative. This one is harder than severing, because the story has been your companion longer than any person has. You have rehearsed the betrayals. You have refined the telling of why you have not moved forward until the telling itself became the reason you have not moved forward. Every time you recount what was done to you, you are not freeing yourself from it. You are feeding it. You are keeping it alive in the present tense when it belongs in the past tense where it can no longer touch you. Stop explaining why you have not arrived. The explanation has become the wall. The wall has become the identity. Third step. Claim the pre-allocated domain, not the one you were offered, not the one that came with permission from someone who had no authority to grant it, the one that was assigned to you before you had a name for it. Step boldly into your calling, your business, your leadership position, without asking for permission. Here is a number that should sit with you. In the research I conducted across indigenous knowledge traditions that had never been in contact with one another, the pattern that kept surfacing was that preparation for a role always preceded knowledge of the role. The people who stepped into their domains did not wait for a sign that they were ready. They moved because the container they were in had already reached its capacity, and the movement was the only remaining option. You have been waiting to feel ready. That is the vulnerability. The door is still intact. That is the grace. The door will not stay intact forever. The hinge is already wearing thin, and the longer you stand in front of it rehearsing your readiness, the more the frame itself begins to shift. Every day you wait, the opening narrows. Every day you hesitate, the wall between you and the domain grows a little thicker. You think you are preserving your options by standing still. You are actually watching the exit close in real time. The grace that holds the door open is not a static thing, it is a pressure, a tension, a force that has to be maintained by your movement. The moment you stop moving toward it, the pressure drops. The door begins to swing shut on its own weight. And the strange part is, you will not even hear it close. You will just wake up one morning, reach for the handle that used to be there, and find nothing but smooth wall where the opening once was. That is how the door goes, not with a slam, not with a warning. Just a slow, silent disappearance of the only way out you were ever given, and you will not be able to say when it happened because you were so busy waiting to feel ready that you missed the exact moment you stopped being able to step through. The research showed me this too, not in the traditions I studied, but in the lives of the people who came to me afterward. The ones who lost the door did not lose it in a dramatic collapse. They lost it in 100 small deferrals, 100 tiny decisions to wait, to check once more, to see if maybe the feeling would arrive first. The feeling never arrives first. The feeling arrives in the middle of the movement, not at the beginning. You do not feel ready and then move. You move and then the readiness catches up to you, breathless, apologizing for its lateness. Everyone who has ever stepped into a pre-allocated domain will tell you the same thing. They were terrified, they were uncertain, they had 100 reasons to wait. And they moved anyway. That is the only difference between the ones who walk through and the ones who stand at the glass watching. The ones who walked through did not have more certainty, they had more movement. They understood that the container would not expand to fit them, they would have to expand to fill the container. And the expansion only happens on the other side of the threshold, not before it. So the question is not whether you are ready, the question is whether you are willing to be ready inside the domain rather than outside it. Because the readiness you are waiting for is not a precondition. It is a byproduct. It is what you become after you have already committed, after you have already crossed, after the door has already closed behind you and you realize there is nothing left to do but become what you were always meant to be. The window is open now. The door is still intact, but the force holding it open is your own forward motion, and that motion has to begin before the feeling, not after it. That is the protocol. That is the order of operations. And the door will not wait for you to feel worthy of it. The door does not care about your worthiness. The door cares only about your direction. Move toward it and it opens. Stop moving toward it and it closes. The grace is not a guarantee, it is a timer. And that timer is already running, so here is where the protocol stops being a theory and becomes a command, not a suggestion. Not an invitation you are free to consider at your leisure. The standing command of immediate alignment issues one operational order, and it issues it without apology. Execute your movement now, not when you feel better. Not when the numbers in your account make sense. Not when someone you respect finally gives you permission. Now. You have been waiting for a better sign. I understand why. You have been burned before by moving too soon. You learn to wait for confirmation, for the doors to swing open on their own, for the path to be so obvious that moving feels like walking downhill. That waiting served you once. It protected you from a premature step. But the waiting has outlived its purpose, and if you keep waiting, it will not protect you anymore. It will hold you in place while the window closes around you. Your alignment window is open. That is the fact. Hesitation is the only remaining vulnerability in your field. You have done the severing. You have relinquished the narrative. You have claimed the domain internally by occupying it in your own knowing before you occupy it publicly. What remains is the actual step, the physical, visible, irreversible movement that the rest of the world can finally register. I want to be clear about what the command is not asking. It is not asking you to be reckless. It is not asking you to abandon wisdom and charge forward blindly. It is not asking you to act without preparation. What it asks is that you stop confusing preparation with delay. There is preparation that is genuine groundwork, and there is preparation that is fear wearing a hard hat. You know which one you have been doing because you have been doing the same version for years. Do not wait for a better sign. The sign you are waiting for is not coming because it was never scheduled to arrive. You have already received every signal you are going to receive. The lack of a further signal is not an absence. It is the final confirmation. When the door stops opening wider, that is not a rejection. That is the door telling you it is fully open. And the only reason you are not walking through is that you have decided, somewhere underneath the fear, that you are waiting for it to open wider. Do not wait for more money. The money has never been the gatekeeper of your movement. It has been the excuse. You told yourself that once the resources were there, you would move, but the resources were never going to arrive before the movement, because the movement is what summons them. The provision follows the step. It does not precede it. You have been standing at the edge waiting for the water to part, and the water does not part for people who stand at the edge. It parts for people who step in. Do not wait for external validation. This is the hardest one. I know, because you have been trained your whole life to measure your legitimacy by what other people confirm. Trained to believe that a calling is not real until someone else names it. But the people you are waiting to validate you are the same people who could not see what you were carrying when it was right in front of them. You are not going to receive validation from the people who could not perceive you. That is not a tragedy. It is a relief. It means the validation you were waiting for was never going to come from them, and you are released from the waiting. The command is simple. Execute your movement now. The window is open. The only thing that can close it is your own hesitation. But here is what I want you to understand about the timing, because this is where most people get confused. They think that because the window is open, they have time. They think an open window means a relaxed pace. It does not. An open window is not a resting place. It is a moving target. A window stays open for a specific duration, and then it closes, and everything that could have moved through it must find another way or not move at all. And this is where the seal becomes important, because you will not always be able to feel whether the window is still open. You will have moments of doubt. You will wake up some morning and the old pull will be gone, and you will wonder whether you missed it, whether the window closed while you were hesitating. In those moments, you will need something you can check, a signpost. Not a feeling, not a memory of conviction. A physical, verifiable sign that the window is active and locking. This is what the alignment seal token provides. There is a reason the protocol includes this. The command is not issued into a void. It is issued with confirmation so that you can check yourself against reality and know without doubt that the moment you are in is the moment you were told about. Here is what the seal looks like. Over the next 48 hours from the moment you hear these words, you will receive 3 physical confirmations that the window is active. Not psychological, not metaphorical, physical. Sensations that register in your body whether you believe in them or not. The first is a surge of urgent clarity in the solar plexus, the kind that arrives without warning in the middle of an ordinary moment and presses against you from the inside. It is not anxiety. You know the difference, because anxiety is scattered and confused, and this is focused. It is not fear. Fear pulls you back. This pushes you forward. It is your body registering, before your mind has caught up, that a decision point has arrived and that you are meant to move through it. People have described it as a hand pressing on the center of their chest, or a warmth that starts below the sternum and spreads outward. Some call it a green light in the body. Whatever you call it, you will recognize it when it comes, because it will come with a sudden, deep clarity about what you are supposed to do next. Not the whole plan, just the next step. Firmly, unmistakably. The second is an immediate intolerance for low-frequency chatter. I want to be careful how I say this, because it is not about being rude. It is not about judging the people around you. It is narrower and stranger than that. Over the next 48 hours, you will find that gossip, complaints, drama, and recycled anxiety become physically difficult to sit through. Your nervous system will reject them the way a body rejects food that has gone bad. You will feel it as restlessness, as a pulling away, as an urge to leave the room. People will notice you disengaging, and they may take it personally, and you are not required to explain it. This intolerance is not a flaw in your character. It is a calibration. Your system is being tuned to a higher signal, and the higher signal cannot coexist with the noise. The chatter that used to be bearable, that you tolerated for the sake of politeness, will now feel like sandpaper on your attention. This is happening on purpose. The third is the sequence. The numbers. You have seen them before, I suspect. Everyone who is paying attention has. But over the next 48 hours, they will be impossible to miss. Repeatedly, in ways that do not feel like coincidence. The master sequence 1111, and paired with it 555. Let me tell you what these sequences are, because they are not random, and they are not superstition, and the fact that you keep seeing them is not your mind playing tricks. The number 1111 is the direct gate. It has been recognized across traditions, across recorded history, as the marker of a threshold moment, the instant when a door opens that has been locked until now. It is the sign that you are standing exactly at the point of entry. And 555 is the marker of rapid structural transformation. It does not announce a small change. It announces the kind of change that rearranges the architecture, that takes down what was built and replaces it with something that operates on a different principle entirely. When you see 1111 paired with 555 over and over in the same 48-hour window, you are not imagining a pattern. You are being shown a signature. The alignment is active. The window is locking. There is no more waiting to be done. What you choose to do with the next 48 hours is the entire question. You have been given the command and you have been given the seal. The first tells you what to do. The second tells you that you are doing it at the right time. What remains is the doing, and there is an ancient conversation about this very moment that has been waiting for you to arrive. You have heard fragments of it. The Book of Revelation, the Great Tribulation, the End Times. You have been trained to hear those words as threats, as warnings of a wrathful sky, as the script of a catastrophe you must brace against. And I want to offer you something else entirely, because the language of fear has obscured something that was never meant to terrify you. The Book of Revelation is not a horror story. It is an unveiling. That is what the word means. An apocalypse is not an explosion of punishment. It is the removal of a veil, the revealing of what has been true all along beneath the surface of what you could see. The Great Tribulation, the end times, these are not the machinery of a vengeful deity deciding to crush the unworthy. They are the descriptions of what happens when an old world reaches the limit of its capacity to hold what is trying to be born. When a container has reached its maximum, the pressure does not come from outside. The pressure is the inside outgrowing the walls. The end times are the end of a timeline, the closing of an era, the threshold where old structures can no longer contain the frequency of what is arriving, and you are not being asked to brace against it. You are being asked to recognize that you are part of what is arriving. There is a book by Karen Armstrong called Through the Narrow Gate. It is her account of a life stripped down to the bone, a life that had to pass through a passage so narrow that everything extraneous had to be shed. The narrow gate is not an entrance for the proud. It is not an entrance for those who insist on carrying everything they have accumulated. The narrow gate is precisely the width of a person who has let go of what they no longer need. That is what this moment is asking of you. There is another artifact of the culture you have grown up in, something you may have heard 1,000 times without ever hearing it. There is a song by Drake called God's Plan. The phrase itself has been so worn smooth by repetition that it has lost its edge. But consider what it actually means. The plan is not yours to design. The plan is not something you have to invent or force or manipulate into being. The plan is already in motion. It was in motion before you had the words to name it. The only question is whether you will cooperate with it or resist it. Divine timing. You have heard that phrase too, and probably dismissed it as comfort, as a way of saying you will just have to wait. But divine timing is not waiting. Divine timing is precision. It is the recognition that there is a moment when the door opens, and a moment when the door closes, and the difference between the two is not arbitrary. It is not a punishment, it is mathematics. It is the exact point at which the alignment is complete, at which the force of what is arriving can meet the readiness of what is receiving. Spiritual awakening has been treated as a destination, as a state you reach and then rest in. But the awakening is not the end. The awakening is the beginning. It is the moment when you can finally see what you have been looking at all along, and seeing changes everything, because once you have seen, you cannot unsee. Once you have recognized the shape of the door before you, you cannot pretend it is not there. And there is one more figure, one that may seem strange to place alongside the sacred texts and the spiritual frameworks. LeBron James. You know his name. You know the career, the championships, the records. But consider something about him that has nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with the principle this moment is built on. He arrived in the league as the most hyped prospect in history, carrying the weight of expectations that would have crushed a lesser vessel, and he did not become what he became by waiting for the right circumstances. He did not wait for the perfect team or the perfect coach or the perfect situation before he began to build. He entered the arena with what he had, in the circumstances he was given, and he became a champion not because the conditions were perfect but because he moved when the time to move arrived. There were years he lost. There were failures. There were seasons where the world declared his moment had passed. And he did not stop. Because the timing of his greatness was never determined by the critics. It was determined by his own execution. That is the model. That is the mirror. You have been waiting for the circumstances to become worthy of you, waiting for permission, waiting for the moment when everything is aligned and nothing could possibly go wrong. And I am telling you, as plainly as I know how, that the alignment does not precede the movement. The alignment is the movement. The water parts for the step, not for the waiting. There is a word that keeps appearing in this conversation, and I want to linger on it because I think it is the word that most defines where you are standing. Hesitation. You have been told that hesitation is wisdom, that it is caution, that it is the prudent pause before a significant decision. For most people, for people who are not standing where you are standing, that might be true, but you are not most people. You are standing at a threshold that will not remain open indefinitely. Hesitation for you is not wisdom. Hesitation for you is the only remaining vulnerability in your field. I have seen this pattern before. I have lived it. I have spent years of my life in a rented room in Leith, convinced that my hesitation was prudence, convinced that the waiting was a test I needed to pass, convinced that if I just remained patient enough, the circumstances would eventually rise to meet me. And what I learned, from the floor rather than from books, is that the waiting was not preparation. The waiting was fear wearing a hard hat. The waiting was a way of feeling busy while never actually taking the step that would have changed everything. You have reached the maximum storage capacity of your old container. That is not a metaphor. That is an engineering fact. A vessel that is full cannot hold one more drop without breaking or expanding, and you were not built to break. You were built to expand, but expansion cannot happen while you are still trying to fit inside the shape of the life that was never yours. The old relationships, the old roles, the old stories you have been telling about yourself, they are not going to survive this, and you know that. You have known it for some time. That is why you cannot tolerate the low-frequency chatter the way you used to. That is why the conversations that once felt bearable now feel like sandpaper. Your architecture has changed. The old world no longer fits. So I am not asking you to do anything heroic. I'm not asking you to take a leap of faith into an abyss. I am asking you to step through a door that is already open. The window is not theoretical. The window is now. The seal has been given. The three confirmations have been described. The clarity in the solar plexus, the intolerance for what no longer serves, the repeated citing of the sequences that mark the threshold and the transformation. You have felt them. You have seen them, and you have been treating them as questions, as things to interpret, as signs you are not sure you are allowed to trust. I am telling you that they are not questions. They are answers. The only question that remains is what you will do with them. I want to release you from that image because it is not true. The word last chance has been used to terrify people into compliance for centuries. That is what religion has done with it. That is what the fear merchants have done with it. But the last chance I am describing is not a threat from a punitive deity. It is a mathematical window of momentum. It is the physics of a door that opens because the time has come for it to open, and closes because the time for it to close has also come. It is not anger. It is order. The grace period you have been given is not a countdown to destruction. It is an invitation to dignity. You can step out of the lower density environments voluntarily, with your head held high, with the knowledge that you chose your own leaving, or you can wait and be stripped of those environments when the timeline shifts automatically, when the force of what is arriving makes it impossible for the old structures to remain standing around you. Both paths lead to the same destination. You are going to step into your pre-allocated power either way. The only difference is the quality of the journey. The only difference is whether you arrive as someone who moved with the current or someone who was dragged by it. You are a threshold sovereign. That is not a title I am giving you as flattery. It is a description of your actual position. You are hovering on the verge of a major timeline elevation, and you have been stalling, not because you are weak, but because the things you are being asked to release are real to you. The nostalgia is real, the reluctance to set hard boundaries is real, the hesitation is real, and none of that is a sin. None of that marks you as unworthy. That hesitation is the natural human buffer that has served its purpose. It protected you while you were still being prepared. It kept you from moving before you were ready, but its purpose is complete. The preparation is done. The buffer has served its function, and if you continue to rely on it now, it will become the very thing that delays your ascension. The victim narrative functions the same way. You have told the story of what was done to you. You have rehearsed the betrayals, the losses, the closed doors, and there was a time when telling that story was necessary. There was a time when you needed to name what had happened in order to survive it. But the telling has become a habit, and the habit has become an identity, and the identity is now the thing standing between you and the throne. The explanation has become the wall. The word last chance has been used to terrify people into compliance for centuries. That is what religion has done with it. That is what the fear merchants have done with it. But the last chance I am describing is not a threat from a punitive deity. It is a mathematical window of momentum. It is the physics of a door that opens because the time has come for it to open, and closes because the time for it to close has also come. It is not anger, it is order. The grace period you have been given is not a countdown to destruction, it is an invitation to dignity. You can step out of the lower density environments voluntarily, with your head held high, with the knowledge that you chose your own leaving, or you can wait and be stripped of those environments when the timeline shifts automatically, when the force of what is arriving makes it impossible for the old structures to remain standing around you. Both paths lead to the same destination. You are going to step into your pre-allocated power either way. The only difference is the quality of the journey. The only difference is whether you arrive as someone who moved with the current or someone who was dragged by it. You are a threshold sovereign. That is not a title I am giving you as flattery. It is a description of your actual position. You are hovering on the verge of a major timeline elevation. And you have been stalling, not because you are weak, but because the things you are being asked to release are real to you. The nostalgia is real. The reluctance to set hard boundaries is real. The hesitation is real, and none of that is a sin. None of that marks you as unworthy. That hesitation is the natural human buffer that has served its purpose. It protected you while you were still being prepared. It kept you from moving before you were ready. But its purpose is complete. The preparation is done. The buffer has served its function, and if you continue to rely on it now, it will become the very thing that delays your ascension. The victim narrative functions the same way. You have told the story of what was done to you. You have rehearsed the betrayals, the losses, the closed doors. And there was a time when telling that story was necessary. There was a time when you needed to name what had happened in order to survive it. But the telling has become a habit, and the habit has become an identity, and the identity is now the thing standing between you and the throne. The explanation has become the wall.